at Last, where we share ideas to help families tackle major issues. I'm your host, Regina DeMeo, and with me today is Nancy Leopold of College Tracks. Thanks so much for being here, Nancy.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I really want to find out more about your organization and have viewers understand what it is that you do. So what is College Tracks?
College Tracks is a college access and success program. What we do is we help kids who have no one else in their lives who are familiar enough with the college admissions and financial aid process. We help them through it.
Okay.
So we believe that every student who graduates from a Montgomery County public school system high school deserves the chance to go to college,
sure,
regardless of what their family's income is, what their history of college going is in their family. And sadly, a growing number of kids in MCPS, through no fault of their own, fall into a large category of kids who are going to need this help more than others. So, and more than the school system is equipped to give them.
Okay.
So what College Tracks does is we partner with the schools. We work full-time in the schools with staff and volunteers who help those kids to get through the process. We work with juniors and seniors largely. And we're right now at 2 high schools, Bethesda Chevy Chase High School, where we started, and Wheaton High School, where we expanded to.
Nice. And it's a nonprofit, right?
We are a nonprofit organization. We started as an all-volunteer organization, a group of parents really trying to solve a problem that we saw at the high school our kids attended, where friends of our own kids, who were equally qualified, equally motivated to get to college, were approaching us for help because they had no one else to help them. And we realized that it was a problem that a lot of kids in the school were having, and we thought, well, maybe we can do something about this. So for the first few years, we were all volunteers, every single one of us, and we met with the kids one afternoon a week after school, and then we quickly expanded to one evening a week at the community center in Rosemary Hills in Silver Spring, where many of the kids lived, where we could also meet with kids and their parents.
Okay.
We trained volunteers as we learned more about it. It was a sort of each one, teach one sort of thing. And we worked with about 40 to 70 high school seniors a year. So we were doing good, but we weren't able to do great because we just didn't have the time to really follow kids through a process which is so complex that it is hard for them to keep track of where they were in the process.
Right.
So we had a tremendous opportunity in 2006. The Jack Kent Cooke Foundation, which was founded by the estate of Jack Kent Cooke, the former owner of the Redskins, was looking to make grants to start up college access organizations. And by then we'd figured out that we fit into this category called college access, and that we weren't the only people on the planet who had this idea, that in fact there are hundreds of such organizations, community-based organizations throughout the country. And we had joined the National College Access Network which is the sort of association for all of those.
Okay.
Excellent resource where we could learn a lot of best practices. So it was really important to us to build on what was already determined to work. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel by any means, and we just didn't have those kinds of, that's nuts anyway, so we didn't want to do it.
Right.
So we got a grant from them, a 2-year grant that helped us to, and help incorporating as a 501c3, which was a requirement. And their requirements were that we had to be an official nonprofit, and that we had to be in collaboration with the public school system. And the public school system at that point was incredibly supportive. Thrilled at what had happened at BCC, even though it was just a volunteer program. We'd already, changed a lot of lives, and immediately saw the opportunity to expand it. And we chose Wheaton High School for a number of reasons, but among them, the need there is the greatest. Really, they have the greatest percentage of what colleges call underserved kids. So these would be low to moderate income, first generation to college, minority, immigrant. These categories of people who are going to have more trouble, essentially, not, again, because they don't deserve it, but just because it's really tough. So we expanded to Wheaton High School, and that was so we started there in 2006, and since then we've worked with over 2,000 kids.
Wow. I was going to ask you how many students
Yes.
you've worked with.
Yeah, we've worked with, now we work with approximately 600 high school kids between the two high schools each year, so those are juniors and seniors. And in 2010, we added what's typically known as the College Success Program. It's a program that kids opt into, college tracks kids who have gotten into college, if they wish, and if they're going to the 14 schools that are closest to us so that we can reach them. They can elect to join the College Success Program, where we teach them the critical college success skills through workshops. We do individual 4-year plans with them, so that change often, but because, as my father used to say, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Right. And it's, to have a notion of what your goal is really informs the sort of decisions that you make along the way. And then we have at least 2 check-ins between our college success coaches and each college student each semester.
Wow.
So we're tracking and supporting how they're doing. They're doing fabulously well, and we measure those outcomes very minutely, but and they're having the kinds of challenges that all kids have at college that are then compounded if you don't have much money and you don't have people in your family to turn to for all those many times where things can go wrong and seem huge. And more often than not, our coaches can help hook the kids up to resources on their campus, which is often the most important way they solve their problems, making sure that they're hooked into the financial aid office, to the support services, to all of that, and to provide them, the sort of advice that will help them make good decisions, and therefore help them have a greater chance of graduating.
Wow, no, that's amazing. Now, it's mostly, how many volunteers do you have now?
We now have 60 volunteers. We have 11 staff members and we have 60 volunteers. So what that looks like on the ground is that each high school has 2 to 3 full-time staff members who are there full-time, as well as before and after school. We're sort of a 24/7 program.
Okay.
And are often available to the kids by email, at other times when schools are closed, because we all know that students tend to wake up in the evening, right when the workday has ended. So we are very much school-based, and one of my staff members coined the phrase that we're a stalking and nagging program, which is one way of saying that we're in the schools, our offices are in the college and career centers in the high schools, so that kids can find us and we can find them. Because there are many times in the process where kids are unaware that they're hitting a deadline that's critical. And so we have the ability, because we collect a lot of data, and we are actually able to tease out who's doing what right now and who hasn't done what right now, and how might we need to remind them and help them to get that done.
Wow. So
there are also about 20 volunteers in each high school who work sometimes once a week, sometimes a little less. But so every afternoon after school, we have volunteers available. Sometimes during the lunch periods also. And then we have a separate core of about 20 volunteers that we started 2 or 3 years ago, who focus exclusively on ACT prep, on helping kids prep for the ACT standardized test, which is one of the 2 standardized tests that's required to get into any 4-year school.
Okay.
So that's how we add to 60. We couldn't do it without the volunteers.
Yeah, no.
We also couldn't have the impact that we have. Almost every one of the 330 seniors we worked with last year were accepted to at least one college or technical school. 63% of them were accepted to a 4-year school.
Wow.
And about half of our kids elected to go to 4-year schools, and the other half to Montgomery College or other 2-year options. And we just couldn't have that kind of impact without the volunteers.
Right.
We need a lot of adults to help 330 students get through the gauntlet.
What is the process? Because I'm sure that the process we went through many years ago.
Yeah, totally different.
It's very different.
Right. I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, I remember filling my applications out sort of in a few evenings and typing them back in the days of the typewriter and mailing them off, making sure they were postmarked by the deadline, and that was about it. That was really all that was required. We had to take standardized tests, but our high schools managed that. Yeah, the process has gotten a lot more complicated since you and I did that.
Okay.
It's gotten complicated for a number of reasons. One reason is a really good reason, which is that many, many, many more people want to go to college. Okay. So there may be as many as 5 times as many people trying to go to college now as did back in the Stone Age when I applied. Right. And the number of seats in colleges hasn't really changed. So what that means for the more selective colleges, the colleges who accept say fewer than 40% of the kids who apply, is that they now have many, many, many more kids applying for the same number of seats. Now, it is also true that about 75% of the colleges in the United States are not very selective, and we in Montgomery County and in other high-achieving counties tend to focus intently on the very selective schools and sort of freak ourselves out by thinking that the entire college world works that way, and it doesn't. That said, we want to make sure that our college tracks kids, as we want to make sure for our own kids, have the best options possible.
Right.
So that means that we have to be prepared to get them into schools that are selective. So what does that mean? That means that starting at least in their junior year, we want to make sure they are prepped for and register for the SAT or the ACT or both, so that they have a sense of how they're doing and can elect to do that again during their senior year. Also, we get kids in during their junior year to try and help them think about this whole process and start thinking about themselves. Because that really understanding who you are, what you've done, and what you want is the key element to making sure that it's a match.
Right.
And the research is really, really clear about underrepresented kids in college, that one of the reasons that they don't succeed, either in getting there or in graduating, is because they for several reasons. One is that they undermatch, meaning that they have a greater tendency than their more affluent peers to apply to and go to schools that are not as selective as the schools that they could get into.
Interesting.
And the problem is not necessarily that they won't get as good an education. The problem is that the more selective a school, the greater resources they put in to making sure kids graduate. Right. So they have higher graduation rates. So just in terms of getting yourself in line, to go to a school where you're likely to graduate, you want to make sure that there's a good match. And typically, underrepresented kids will apply to the schools that are close by and that they know of. And those often are undermatches for them. Not exclusively, and we have great state schools, et cetera, but it's a default that can be problematical. The other issue for underrepresented kids is that they don't know about and they aren't able to hit all the milestones in the process. So you asked what the process is. I mean, the first process is sort of collecting all the information about yourself, everything from your transcript and your GPA, to building an activities sheet or resume, what you've done outside of school, whether that's traditional extracurricular activities and it may include maybe you've been taking care of your 3 siblings after school. Maybe there are many things that you've done that colleges want to know about, and if you don't take the time to collect them and put them in one place, you don't have a sense of them, and you can't, and your guidance counselors and your teachers aren't going to be as good at writing recommendations that sort of sell you if they don't have a sense of who you are. So that's really the first step. And there are some, and in MCPS high schools, you're required, each one is a little different, but you're required to fill out what are often called self-assessment sheets. Sometimes,
I definitely want to get to that.
Yeah.
So if we can just take a little short break,
sure.
Then we'll be right back.
Mom, I'm not going to go to college.
Yes.
No.
You will go to college.
Their tomorrow depends on your words today.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. Stop the texts. Stop the wrecks.
Welcome back to Making It Last. I'm your host, Regina DeMeo, and with me today is Nancy Leopold of College Tracks, and we're talking about the whole ridiculous college application process. Thanks for being here, Nancy.
Sure.
So this self-assessment thing, it was interesting because when I went to BCC and while I was waiting for you, I was talking to one of the students, and I mean, she was so impressive. You know, here's this 17-year-old girl, and she has a very clear idea of what she wants to study and what she wants to do, and I was very much the same way. But I don't know that that's normal. I don't know that most 17-year-olds know, like, I'm going to study women's, women's lit, and I'm going to go back to Egypt, and I'm going to, spread the word over there, which is what this woman wanted to do.
Right.
In my case, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, and I was, like, on a mission. Right? But I don't think that's normal for a 17-year-old.
Right.
So how do people do this self-assessment?
Well, first off, the questions that are on the self-assessment forms that the high schools require are actually very good questions.
Okay.
And spending some time and thinking them through is definitely recommended. I think first it's about understanding what your own interests and passions are, whether they are academic or not. Because and any ideas that a student has about what kind of career they want, or even what kinds of work they want to do. All of that sort of helps, because now what you're trying to do is identify some academic areas that interest you so that you can look at colleges in terms of majors, for example. You're also, from the other side, you're looking at careers that interest you, and there's some great research tools available where kids can identify careers that interest them and then see what the educational, higher ed pathways are, essentially, to do that. So they include all the MCPS schools have Naviance. It's a software program available. It has a career search and then a college search piece. That's terrific. There's a fabulous federal site called that's studentaid.ed.gov. It's part of the Department of Education. Okay. It has an excellent career tool so that you can say, I'm interested in engineering, and it will spit out all the many, many different types of jobs, some of which, each of which require a different level of education, describing those jobs and then describing the education to get there. So I think you're trying to get a notion of what you're trying to accomplish in college, which is a means to an end. It's a means to the end of learning how to think, read, and write critically, which is, as any grown-up will tell any child, especially important now that the jobs we aim for now may not even exist, in 10 years. But it also helps to, refine on the substance side, what is it that I would really like to do. There's another site, the College Board has an excellent site called Big Future that has a career piece and then also has a college piece so that you can take your interests that you've decided on the career and academic side, feed them into a search engine along with some other things about your preferences for college, how far away they are, how big they are, whatever, and it'll start to, it'll give you a list that you can start to research, which is really helpful because otherwise it's really confusing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one question I have is, I saw that you guys have a ton of computers and a ton of volunteers, but that's not true in every high school.
Actually, in Montgomery, it's not in every high school in the country. It is true in every high school in this county. I mean, it is one of our great benefits that though it's definitely harder to do this if you don't have a computer, that's hooked to the internet at home. It's not by any means impossible because we do have places. And the other enormous resource that every kid has to use is the College and Career Center, which is in their counseling department.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, because that's where the hot information lives.
But aren't they overwhelmed? I mean, you have 300 seniors in a class and what, 5 counselors?
Yeah, but yes, the answer is yes. I mean, and one of the reasons that we exist is because, and we work in tight collaboration with the counselors, then we're really doing something that they don't have time to do. If each of them has about 300 students and they're responsible for everything from course scheduling to psychosocial, I mean, the well-being of students in every possible way.
Right.
They don't have the tens and hundreds of hours required for a student who has no one else to guide them. So that's where we come in. But the really, really good news is that all Montgomery County high schools have a wealth of information stored in their college and career centers, and that guidance counselors and the college and career center coordinators can steer kids to. So kids and parents can go in with specific questions. You know, can we develop a list of how can we use these resources to develop a list of colleges for my student? What you know, every possible question, and they do have the means to help, you know, parents and students get some answers.
Okay.
So it's, and in many ways we're better off than many other counties
absolutely.
in the nation. So those are
So
important.
let me skip to, because I want to make sure we have time to talk about this, right? So let's just say, like, this, you know, wonderful student actually gets through, like, the testing, finding the right match, sends off, what is it normally 5 or 6 applications?
It varies widely, but for most, we recommend for kids who, well, we recommend that kids have around 6 schools.
Okay.
2 being what we call reaches. These are schools you'd really like to go to, but you're not so sure that you can get in.
Harvard, Yale.
Yeah. And actually reach changes is relative. It depends on who you are.
Right.
And actually Naviance has a fabulous tool called scattergrams where you can actually see the GPAs and standardized test scores for students in your school who got in or didn't get into a particular college. So there are ways to, it's not perfect, but there are ways to assess, you know, where do I fall? Is this even plausible, or is this crazy? 2, what we call target schools. These are schools you're pretty likely to get into. And 2, safety schools. And in those safety schools, we recommend that kids have financial aid safety schools. So what does that mean? That means usually they are schools that are in-state, because most kids are eligible for in-state tuition for schools in Maryland that is significantly cheaper than out-of-state schools. There are also there's also state aid available to Maryland students who attend state schools, both public and private. So the schools in Maryland are going to be can be safe financial aid safety schools. They can also be schools that just happen to cost a little less, or that you might be able to commute to from home, so that your total cost is the tuition and fees and not the room and board.
The average is, my understanding, about $25,000 now for state, and then it could be like $50,000 a year in one of these private institutions like GW.
Right.
GW is like the one of the most expensive schools.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
But these, yes. Let me just say yes. That's the other thing that's changed mightily since you and I applied to school, is that college costs have gone through the roof, way greater than inflation, et cetera. So this. And sadly, a lot of aid has fallen. So this is not a trivial issue.
Right.
Not at all. And students and their parents need to arm themselves with as much information as possible. So first, understand that the retail price of a school means nothing. And you can use resources like Big Future to look at what is the average aid package. Now, average doesn't mean you're going to get it, et cetera. But it's important not to balk simply at the retail price, because two schools with exactly the same retail price could end up with two very different actual prices depending on the aid you get and the aid that you qualify for. Okay, so there are two kinds of aid generally in the world.
Right.
There are need-based aid that's based on your income.
By your income, you mean the family's overall?
By the family's income, and merit-based aid.
Right.
Need-based aid. Need-based aid is calculated using a form called the FAFSA, which is the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's a federal form. It asks for information that's very close to your what's going on in your taxes, basically. And you have to file your taxes, and you use your tax form to fill that in.
Okay.
And you want to fill that in online. And if you can fill it in as early as January 2nd, and in Maryland, you have to fill it out by March 1st to get, and the earlier you do, the better, because it's first come, first serve on the money.
Oh, wow.
Now, what that form is used to do is to calculate what's called your estimated family contribution. So it's based on the concept that families must pay. They must. the government is not going to pay for all of your education,
Right.
no matter how special you are.
Right.
Families are obligated to pay for a certain amount, and there's a complicated formula used to figure out for your family or for my family what's the estimated family contribution.
Okay.
The more you make, the higher your estimated family contribution is. The less you make, the lower it is.
Right.
And there are FAFSA forecasters online that you can use to estimate what your estimated family contribution is going to be, and that'll give you a very valuable tool in figuring out how much aid you might get. There's also state aid, and here's where people say, what can I do to prepare to go to college earlier on? You can get the best grades you possibly can. In the state of Maryland, there's aid available, for example, for kids who have a 2.5 GPA and above. Mm-hmm. Not a 2.49, not a 2.5. This is a very exact process. So it's important in that way. It's also important that the better your grades, the more options you'll have in terms of what schools want you. But financial aid, you got to fill out the FAFSA.
Let me ask you this about, because this is, I think, something that has changed. Yeah. When I was going through this process, I was basically told by my counselors, you go to the best school you get into and kind of ignore what the ticket price is going to be, right? As a result, I left law school with over $100,000 of debt, right? I wish somebody had actually talked to me about the ramifications of how much debt I was taking on.
Yeah,
so
it's huge.
Do you think that slogan of just like go to the best school still applies?
No, it doesn't. It only applies if you have unlimited funds.
I see.
If you have enough money to pay for that, go for it.
Right.
But if you don't, no. As your story points out, it's a terrible trade-off. Right. It's gotten even worse with new laws that make student loan debt impossible to discharge even in bankruptcy.
Right.
So it'll just follow you forever.
For life.
Right. And maybe even your estate, actually. So depending. So no, not a good deal. We really discourage kids from taking more than about $5,000 a year in loans.
Okay.
Because we think $20,000 is still a lot.
That's a lot of money.
It's really still a lot on loans you can't get rid of. So no, we don't. No, you need to go to the best school you can
within your range.
Within your range. Now the other kind of aid is called merit aid, and that's actually grown a great deal in the last few decades. And it's another good reason why your grade point average is so important, because the higher it is, you will be attractive to schools, and they will reward that by giving you financial aid based on your academic record. Not all of them. Obviously, every school is different, and that's why when it's all said and done and you have multiple offers and acceptance letters, you really need to look at them very, very, very closely.
And you do that with your students?
We do that with our students. We do. Because sadly, they're not yet written in uniform language, and it's sometimes it's hard to distinguish. You have to really work hard to distinguish what are loans being offered, what are grants being offered, and you definitely want to separate those out and understand what the gap is going to be. I mean, we consider the gap to be the cost of attendance less any grants you have been offered, grants and scholarships, free money. And after that, now you're dealing with either loans or coming up with cash. And, there's nothing wrong with coming up with cash. I mean, people have saved for college. Sometimes people find that they can move money around, and that's all good.
Well, this has been great. If somebody wanted to contact you for further information, learn more about college tracks, maybe even volunteer or send donations, how would they do that?
The best way to do it is through our website, www.collegetracksusa.org. Tracks spelled like the real word tracks.
Right.
They'll find anything they need to know there and more detail.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so if anybody has any show ideas or would like to be a volunteer guest, you can always contact me at genxsmarty@gmail.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you next week on Making It Last.